manufacturing industry.
Yeah, so they need more time to make their payment. So what we did was took the cost of funds, and we said, well, if the money was sitting in a bank, or what could you do? What's the opportunity cost? What could you do with that money? Or if it was $40,000, what else could they do with that money? And if they're going to give you $40,000 and they're going to give it to you for 2 months, then you compare it to, well, what else could they do with that? That's the lost opportunity. They could have it in the bank and pay you once the product's there. First you said that it wouldn't work, they had to give you the money so that you could actually produce it. So that's one of, even before the insurance and the risk, you got to figure out, well, what's it worth it to them and what's it worth it to us, and what are your cost of funds? If you had to go out and get a loan, and
Absolutely.
you had to pay 10% for a loan to build the product, and you had to carry that loan for 2 months, that would be so many dollars. And so that's how much it's worth to you. I mean, if you can get money at 5%, or if you have cash, you shouldn't have cash, you should have to invest in someplace, but you know what I mean on that? And so you gotta figure out how much it's worth first, then there's the insurance issues.
That's why you really need to put on your investigative hat. Thank you for sharing, Rob. That's very, very, very important. And thank you for bringing up Mexico. The cost of getting financing in Mexico, if you can get it, is like 23% or more. And that's a bank loan. And so, excellent example. If you come in and negotiate that they're going to pay you in 30 days, but all of a sudden, well, how about you give me 10% on that 40,000, 30 days, or, I mean, you're a lot more appealing as a banker than their local banking, because the best rate they can get locally is probably 2 times or 3 times that, and that's very common internationally. And so it would be very important for you through your banking relationship to find out what are the lending rates in Taiwan. Very important, because now now you have some information that will help you in the negotiations, in closing the deal, and maybe even walk away making more money if you're going to be offering credit terms. Yeah, valuable information there.
Are you getting into exchange rates and volatility?
The contracting, I'm not going to get in detail, but the exercise that I have, it's a standalone exercise. If we don't have time to cover it, it'll at least give you the concept of how forward contracts and stuff like that work. That's actually one of the last exercises. But like I said, if you read it, you'll get an idea of how it works, and obviously then you want to sit down with your banker if that opportunity does arise where you have to do a forward contract. But you're probably not that sophisticated yet, so I always tell folks, don't worry about hedging or forward contracts. Just ask payment in U.S. dollar. makes it simpler. So
yeah, somebody kind of has to think through that exchange rate thing as well. If it's highly volatile, because for instance, $1 would buy you 1.3 Canadian dollars 6 months ago. And now $1 will buy you $1 worth of Canadian dollar today. So if you make the deal thinking that it was so much, and if things can change, I guess is the issue. So that's kind of a risk. And if it was a 6-month project and it changed by 30% in value, pretty huge.
So just to finish on this slide, we're talking a lot about this right here, being creative about your financing. And the example with Mexico or your buyer in Taiwan is, again, when negotiating, if you get 50% up front, the open account terms that you're going to be talking about next is where knowing what's available in that local market is very valuable, because you don't want to give them too good of a deal. If they're having to pay 23-25% local rates, and all of a sudden, well, you say, well, how about you just give me 2 points on the open account, or 3 points? You're selling yourself, you're losing a lot of potential profit for really taking in that risk. Does that make sense? I always like to kind of simplify it in that manner. So now we're going to talk about letters of credit. If there's any other questions about wire transfers and stuff like that. There's a couple of different kinds of risks associated. There's hardly any, but it's really, when it comes to letters of credit, it really comes down to discrepancies and the country that you're dealing with. Those are probably 2 things. more so the country risk. Nigeria, the list can go on. And so you always want to look at, and you'll get a lot more practical information, web tools, resources from both Martin and Mary Ann Hughes. Again, Exim Bank has all this stuff online where you go and look at the country ratings and the risks and stuff like that, and they'll have it in their PowerPoints. But they don't cover in detail about the LC, but so they'll help you kind of bring in the tools for initiating this tool, this LC. Again, there's little to none as far as the seller, as far as risk to the buyer. There's little to none as well because again, the bank is holding the money, and it's kind of like a contract. A letter of credit is really like a contract, and certain things have to take place before that money is released. Okay, and that's how the discrepancies come into play, and there's some risk depending if the country is in a very friendly place, and there might be some fraud involved too. So, that's what Exim Bank is around, and they're really good as far as knowing what's going on internationally as far as what's kind of landmines that are out there. Can be high. This is one of the things that people shy away from letters of credit because it does cost on the low side about $800 and up to just issue a LC, and so if about $800 or more, depending on the bank. Did you deal with LCs, Rob, when you were in manufacturing?
Not with them, but not with the Mexico thing.
No,
but
Mexico.
there was another one. It wasn't a fixed rate. It was a variable rate, and it was I'm trying to think. It might have been.
It depends on the amount.
4 or 5%.
Exactly.
Yeah, so they'll charge you a fee and then a percentage, depending on the amount.
And origination fee.
You have percentages in both sides. the one who issued the letter of credit and also the one who received or is the beneficiary of the letter of credit. It has cost behind, in both sides. But obviously it's not as expensive as it could be as far as all of the sites are, let's say, secure on the negotiation. Like the one who's buying knows that he's going to receive the goods, and the one who's selling knows that he's going to receive the payment. So,
Have you issued an LC before, or are you more of the receiver?
both of them.
Both of them? Because, and I'll pass out. Actually, there's probably good leeway to actually pass out the. We'll just leave this on your PowerPoint, on your handouts. You can kind of refer to. There's some terminology on there. I'm not going to go through that. You can look at it as if there's some questions about them. These are the types of letters of credit. We'll be visiting this as I pass out the exercise. Quickly, there's the confirmed LCs, irrevocable, and I think Mary Ann and both Martin will elaborate more in detail about the differences. And then they're drawn in U.S. banks and payable. It's always nice to say on the LC payable in U.S. dollars. So I don't like this one. I wanted to scan. I ran out of time yesterday. This is actually about to print out of it. Yeah, there's kind of it's kind of one of my older slides. I'm trying to better copy this. Better handout. As you can see on this handout, it's actually just reversed the way it's drawn up, but the issuing bank is on the left, advising is on the right. Here, on the last step, the money doesn't go. That's the only thing. If I were to change from here, I would delete this portion here. But just walk through this how it works. Again, you're the seller, the exporter, and the buyer goes to his bank and is on the handout. It's on the left-hand side. He takes his application over to his issuing bank. And also the payment. He has to secure money with the LC. And so that's why I would delete this from this particular side on here. It's a little bit more clear because when you go